to internalize this lesson, that we graciously share it with others so that they too get to know and experience you in a mighty way. These things we ask in your mighty and majestic Son's name, amen. Well, this being Women's Month, and this is the Women's Day lesson, me and my sister are going to do a little tag teaming today. So we will see how this flows and sort of take it from there. So, Grace, slide on up here and I'll slide your way. Okay, that's the only part that...
All right. All right. So we are studying about Rahab, and there are some things that we should be able to look at as far as the qualities that she has that we should have as Christians. She had 3 qualities that we should possess. She was hospitable to the Israelite strangers, so we should be hospitable to strangers. She was protective of her family, and as women and parents and heads of our families, we should be protective of our families. And she was a believer of God. Now, she was a Canaanite, so this was not her religion. This is not what she was brought up to be, but she respected God, and as a result, she was able to believe in him. She had belief in him, that he would take care of her family the way that she was supposed to. Okay. Get over here to the... Oh. Gotcha. All right. So I have a point to ponder, get us talking here. What was the last hurtful name you were called? And hurtful name. And believe me, if you lived as long as we've lived, you've been called some names that wasn't your birth name. So I'm not saying that you got to answer that, tell all, but think about that name. The last time you were called a hurtful name. How did it make you feel? Yeah. And, you know, as children, when you were children and you were called names, your parents would say, well, is that you? You know, so they trying to make you, you know, get over it. But you don't get over it. I'm telling you, some of those things, they stick with you and stay with you. And then the last question I have is, what was your reaction to it? How did you handle it? Did you fight? Did you ball up your fist? Did you draw a line and say, step over this line, I'll take care of you? Or draw...
Like you said, my parents used to say, sticks and stones to break your bone over words and never hurt you.
Right.
They would tell you that
to
keep you from fighting. You know, so don't let it bother you. Just remember they're just talking. But at some point, like I said, you drew a line, put a stick on it.
Don't knock that stick off, because other than that, it's get ready to be on. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna. Yes, ma'am.
I cried because of who said it to me.
Yeah.
I was more hurt who said it to me than what they said.
Right. I'm gonna tell a story about myself. I was not always a good little girl. Yeah. So, my sister Sylvia and myself would be walking down 15th Street, and there just happened to be a family that lived in the next block up from us, and they were a mixed family. So the son was very light-skinned, and the daughter was very dark-skinned. Well, I was a mean little girl back then. And I was saying, and act like I'm calling the dog, but I was really calling that little girl. Yes, I was. And as a result, her brother came to her defense. And that was the only time I ever got into a fight. He knocked my glasses off. Now, if he could have did anything else, but he knocked them glasses off and them glasses get broke, I got to go home and I'm going to get my tail tore up. I don't want that, so I'm getting ready to fight him. And we did. And just as we was getting into it, our grandfather walks down the street, and he calls me aside. So that's the only thing to save me from getting my tail tore up by him and my mother that day. But, I mean, I learned my lesson, not necessarily to stop calling her names, but I learned my lesson, don't let somebody else hear you. That was the lesson I got back then. But since then, yes, I have learned that you don't want to do that. That's not the way that you're supposed to handle yourself. But, I mean, I'm just telling, that's how I was as a little girl. I was the baby. I got away with a whole lot of stuff, so, you know, I thought I could do whatever I wanted to. But I renamed this lesson, even though it's called the story of Rahab, I renamed it Sticks and Stones May Break My Bones, because it's about what she's labeled. And this book that Ann Wills referred me to, All of the Women of the Bible, it says some nice things about Rahab a little bit. It gives us the idea that she might not have been what she was proposed to be. She could have even been an innkeeper because of the way her house was positioned. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the house, and then we're going to go on. So the walls of Jericho, we know there was two walls. There was an outer wall and an inner wall. And in between the walls, there was connecting buildings or structures. And it says that in the book, it says that they built these structures, living structures, in between the walls. They could have been platforms, or they could have just been bricks. So they could have been like wooden structures on a platform between the walls, or they could have been brick and built from one wall to the next wall. But they were living arrangements. So since they're connected to the wall, people coming in could have stayed and had lodging in these homes or in these structures. So that's why they're saying that she could have been like an innkeeper. She did not necessarily have to be what she was being labeled as a harlot. But I'll get into that a little bit more too. But it was because of where her house was located, where her lodging was located, that made her such an advantageous prospect for the Israelites to contact. So, getting on to our story lesson, I'm reading from the Message version, and it says, Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent out from Shittim 2 men as spies. Go look over the land. Check out Jericho. They left and arrived at the house of a harlot named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, we've just learned that men arrived tonight to spy out the land. They're from the people of Israel. The king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you to stay the night in your house. They're spies. They've come to spy out the whole country. The woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, 2 men did come to me, but I didn't know where they had come from. At dark, when the gate was about to be shut, the men left. But I have no idea where they went. Now, this was a common practice that people wanted, if they weren't from that area, from Jericho, if they didn't have secured lodging and they didn't have permission to stay there, they would leave before nightfall. So, but she said, I had no idea. At dark, when the gate was about to shut, the men left, but I have no idea where they went. Hurry up, chase them. You can still catch them. She had actually taken them up on the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that were spread out for her on the roof. Now, stopping here also, because in this book, it mentions that she could have been a businesswoman, because it wasn't common to just have stacks of flax. That was not a regular, unless you were industrious and know how to, you were making things, weaving it to make garments and things. So she could have been a businesswoman. So the fact that she didn't have to be a harlot, like they were saying. That's somebody's idea of, yeah, right. She could have been very multi-talented. She could have been an innkeeper and a businesswoman. So just because you're labeled something doesn't mean that that's what you really are. So the men gave chase down the Jordan Road toward the fords. As soon as they were gone, the gate was shut. Before the spies were down for the night, the woman came up to them on the roof and said, I gotta bring this up a little bit more. I know that God has given you the land. We're all afraid. Everyone in the country feels hopeless. We heard how God dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you, when you left Egypt, and what he did to the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you put under a holy curse and destroyed. We heard it, and our hearts sank. We all had the wind knocked out of us, and all because of you and God, your God, God of the heavens above and God of the earth below. So we know that she believes in God from these statements, because she could have just, she wasn't talking about a little idol. She's talking about somebody that's a being that's powerful. Now promise me by God, I showed you mercy. Now show my family mercy and give me some tangible proof, a guarantee of life for my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, everyone connected with my family. Save our souls from death, our lives for yours, said the men. But don't tell anyone our business. When God turns this land over to us, we'll do right by you in loyal mercy. She lowered them down out a window with a rope, because her house was on the city wall to the outside. So you know now that her house was placed where it was placed. She had a window on the wall that she could let them down. But again, this was advantageous for her and for the Israelites. She told them, run for the hills so your pursuers won't find you. Hide out for 3 days and give your pursuers time to return. Then get on your way. The men told her, in order to keep this oath you made us swear, here is what you must do. Hang this red rope out the window through which you let us down, and gather your entire family with you in your house. Father, mother, brothers, and sisters. Anyone who goes out the doors of your house into the street and is killed, it's his own fault. We aren't responsible, but everyone within the house, we take full responsibility. If anyone lays a hand on one of them, it's our fault. But if you tell anyone of our business here, the oath you made us swear is canceled. We're no longer responsible. So this is significant because it This red rope symbolizes the blood that was put on the doorposts in Egypt for the Passover. And we see this in Exodus chapter 12, verses 21 through 23. It says, Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, Go at once and select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some out of the door of your house until morning. Put some of the blood on the top of both sides of the door frame. None of you shall go out of the door of your house until morning. So this is the same thing that they are instructing Rahab's family. Stay inside until we tell you, pretty much. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on top and sides of the door frame and will pass over that doorway. And he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. So they're saying that when they see that rope hanging out her window, they will leave that location alone. Okay. She said, If that's what you say, that's the way it is, and sent them off. They left, and she hung the red rope out the window. So moving on down to chapter 6 of Joshua, verses 22 through 25. Through 24. No, I'm going to go through 25. Yeah. So Joshua ordered the two men who had spied out the land, enter the house of the harlot, and rescue the woman and everyone connected with her, just as you promised her. So the young spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, mother, and brothers, everyone connected with her. They got the whole family out and gave them a place outside the camp of Israel. But they burned down the city and everything in it, except for the gold and silver and the bronze and iron vessels. All that they put into the treasure of God's house. But Joshua let Rahab the harlot live, Rahab and her father's household, and everyone connected to her. She is still alive and well in Israel because she hid the agents whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. So this is how we get Rahab became a part of the family of in the lineage of Christ, which we find in Matthew chapter 1. And I'm going to skip down to verse 5, and it says, And Solomon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab, and Boaz, the father of Obed, by Ruth, and Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David, and David was the father of Solomon, by the wife of Uriah. And it continues on until I'm skipping all the way down to verse 16. And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called the Messiah. So we see that Rahab was part of the lineage of the family of Jesus. All right. So we're going to take a deep dive into the story of Rahab. It's always challenging to move beyond your past, especially when it comes to religious communities. Rahab was a Canaanite woman who helped out the people of God, and she was ultimately protected. Rahab is labeled a prostitute, but was she a particular brazen and seductive woman who led men into temptation? Not necessarily. Rahab is named in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 29 through 31. Since by an act of faith, Israel walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. The Egyptians tried it and drowned. By faith, the Israelites marched around the walls of Jericho for 7 days, and the walls fell flat. By an act of faith, Rahab, the Jericho harlot, welcomed the spies and escaped the destruction that came on those who refused to trust God. So we know that she trusted God. Now, she is part of a long list of other faithful people like David. However, it's interesting that King David is listed as King David and not David the murderer or David the adulterer, which he could have been listed, but they didn't call him those names. They called him King David. Name calling is a sign that the church and Christians tradition may have a difficult time of forgiving and forgetting, and yes, we do. Perhaps the name prostitute means very little to God. God saw her as a courageous and heroic woman. Rahab was wise and willing to risk her life and become a witness to the wonder of God's miraculous salvation. And we see this as again, in the woman who was caught in adultery in John chapter 8, verses 3 through 8. Says the religion scholars and Pharisees led in a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They stood her in plain sight of everyone and said, "Teacher," talking to Jesus, "this woman was caught red-handed in the act of adultery. Moses in the law gives orders to stone such persons. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something incriminating so they could bring charges against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger in the dirt. They kept at him, badgering him. He straightened up and said, "The sinless one among you, go first. Throw the stone." Bending down again, he wrote some more in the dirt. Well, if the salvation hadn't come as a result of Rahab's faithfulness to God, then this might not have occurred in the life of Jesus. So another thing that she's mentioned for is, I said hospitality, I said her protectiveness, and I said her belief in God. So here's the hospitality part. It's a key theme in the story of Rahab. She offers radical hospitality to at the risk of her life, losing her life and the lives of those in her household. But we see this mentioned in James. We see this again mentioned in James chapter 2, verses 23 through 26. The full meaning of believe in the scripture sentence, Abraham believed God and was set right with God, includes his action. It's the weave of believing and acting that got Abraham named God's friend. Is it not evident that a person is made right with God not by a barren faith, but by a faith fruitful in works? The same with Rahab, the Jericho harlot. Wasn't her action in hiding God's spies and helping them escape that seamless unity of believing and doing? What counted with God? The very moment you separate God, body and spirit, you end up with a corpse. Well, separate faith and works, and you get the same thing, a corpse. So we see that she is the three things I mentioned that we as Christians should be, which is hospitable to strangers. We should be protective of our families, and we should believe in God. So our next portion is about Shirley Chisholm. Now, I'm going to let you know now, I didn't do my due diligence on this part because I was working with Rahab, trying to make sure I had her covered thoroughly. So what I have here is what's in your lesson. Shirley Chisholm, she was born November 30th, 1924, which is the same year our mother was born. And she she passed on in January 1st, 2005. Shirley Anita St. Hill Chisholm was the first African-American woman in Congress and the first to run for presidency. Her autobiography is titled "Unbought and Unbossed." As women, we should like this, and sheds light on her work as an advocate for minorities and women. She went from church nursery worker to fighting for her place amongst discrimination in the presidential race. She was a pioneer and led the way with her Chisholm Trail, that was her slogan, for African American women in politics. She once said, "I want to be remembered as a woman who dared to be a catalyst of change." If you want, I can email y'all a file on her, which, like I said, I didn't take the time to read it because I was trying to get my lesson together on Rahab. But I do have that information available, and I can email it to you if you are interested in more information about her. Moving on, we're going to discuss the story of Rahab. So the first thing we see is name calling. Well, we've already talked about the sticks and stones breaking our bones, but harsh words can also break our spirits, because if we let those words sink in and we internalize them, they will determine how we live our lives. Words like failure, disappointment, slut, stoner, dumb, can harm us in ways that make it difficult to move beyond as we grow older. And something that happened to one of my children, and the only reason I'm saying it happened to her is because I was not a teacher's assistant. Her first grade teacher wanted parents to come and help tutor the kids in the classroom because they were struggling with math. So I volunteered and I became one of the tutors, and we only had to do one week, one day a week. So I think Friday was the day that she was picking for people to come and tutor the kids. So on my Friday, I'm hearing this older white lady talk about the kids in this group that needed to be tutored. And she's calling them, now her policy was you can't tutor your own child. You can tutor others. So on the day that you were going to be the tutor, your child wasn't part of that group. So my daughter wasn't in the group that she was discussing at the time. But she's calling them dumb, stupid. Now, if she's saying this to my face, I'm saying she's saying this to the other parents' faces, and my child is in that group. So I know that she was calling my child these words, and it infuriated me. Now, I found out, because I complained to another teacher about it, I found out that she was retiring that year, and it was a forced retirement. So I'm like, oh, they making her leave. They already know what she's like, and they're getting rid of her. But that was still no consolation, because my child got held back that year as a result of not being able to keep up with everybody else. Now, I know she wasn't the only child that was held back, but still, that was my child. So I was concerned about that. And I was going to mention it to the principal of the school, and I was asked not to by the teacher I had complained to, because she said it's bad enough that they're making her leave, but if you do this, that can affect her pension. So I didn't bring the complaint, but I wanted to, and I think I should have. Anyway, words, like I said, can hurt us if we internalize them. The good news is that God calls us by different names: beloved, compassionate, generous, courageous. He loves us. He calls us by name. He calls us by our name. He knows our name. We are his friend, and he has taken the step to make sure we are his friend. So in our first discussion, have you ever been given a negative label? So I was going to put a slash on this one and say, are a negative prognosis, something negative in your life that affected your life. Because negative things can affect us and affect us deeply. So what names would God give you? What name do you think he's calling you? What does he call you when you're having a conversation with him? Is he calling you his friend? Or is he calling you, I don't know about her. I don't know about him. No, I think if we are doing what we should be doing, he's calling us his friend.
Are you saying God?
God, yes.
He calls you his child.
His child, yes. Yes. Anybody else? All right, number 2, we're going to talk about this hospitality. Radical hospitality is a gift that Rahab offers us. She makes room for the stranger and dealt kindly with them. She is an example of God's steadfast love, even when it means risking your life and reputation. Have you ever put your life on the line for a stranger? Have you ever had cause to put your life on the line for a stranger? It's something that might happen. It's something that might not happen. But if we are open to God's love and doing the things that he encourages us to do, it could actually take place. In what ways might Christians be called to radical hospitality and steadfast love? I think we're called to do those things when we help the houseless, when we feed people that we see are in need. Those are the kind of ways that we show radical hospitality. But we can do more, and we know we can do more. It's stepping outside that comfort zone, because the comfort zone is what says, oh, I'll do this much, but I won't go no further. And sometimes God is calling us to go further. Number 3, the prostitute. So I was anxious to get to this part because I have something I'm going to be talking to y'all about a little bit later. Yes, it's difficult to talk about sex in church, but it's important to name when sex becomes degrading or dehumanizing. The church can be a safe place to talk about issues of forced prostitution and sex trafficking. This topic might seem inappropriate for many congregations, but there is a real issue of sex trafficking affecting women and children. Sex trafficking is not only a third world issue, but a practice that goes on in the United States and definitely here in Louisville.
What they call it, the teapots that they go through.
Yeah. The story of Rahab, the story of Rahab does not offer a quick and easy solution, but it does open the door for people of faith to discuss and to come alongside groups that are solving these problems. So, here we go. Discussion number 3, what ways can our church or we partner with organizations that promote awareness for sex trafficking? And this is where I'm putting my little spiel out for a group called Rahab's Rope. I came across this organization, maybe about 5 years ago. David and I were at a ACS conference, and they have had vendors set up, and I like purses, I like bags. Like some people like shoes. I can't wear just any kind of shoe, so I go for the bag or go for the purse. And I saw this really cute tote bag, and I'm like, oh, wow. It didn't cost that much. I got it. And inside of it, there was this little piece of paper that told about the organization. So the bag itself it was multicolored, and it was the pieces on the bag had been cut from women in India who had been trafficked, and it was their sarai, their clothing that was made of the bag was made of these pieces were sewn together and made this bag. And that's what Rahab's Rope does. This organization that is helping these women and the children in India is called Rahab's Rope. It exists to empower women and children in the fight against human trafficking in India. Now, India, like I said, is not the only place where this is going on, but it's one of the places that it's done so prolifically. I mean, the numbers are outstanding there that you would, I don't even want to think about the numbers. It's just horrible. And it's not just females. It's also young boys. It's kids. It's horrible. But anyway, these organizations, the women start working to help themselves. They get jobs and they are able to be sustainable so they don't have to do this. Because the reason that they're doing this, a lot of them, is to take care of their families. But they're not getting the money. Somebody else is getting the money. So, it's a no good situation. And it's the same here. I mean, you cannot afford to take your eyes off of anybody nowadays, especially children. If they're out playing, you need to know where they are. You need to be aware. You need to be aware, have them be aware of their surroundings and not be trusting of just anybody. They need to know. One of the things that our daughters did with their children, because they had sons, and believe me, like I said, boys are not exempt. People snatch boys just like they snatch girls. But they had words, like if somebody was to come up and say, "Oh, your mama sent me to get you," and so the conversation that would go on, if they didn't say the word that they knew was a safe word, or a word that their parent would have said, then they knew not to trust that person. So those are the kind of things that you have to do with your children so that they know that, you are protecting them even though you can't be with them 24/7, that you have something in place. And it was so funny because the word that they used, that one of my daughters used, that I thought was so funny, was mustard. And I said, "Why mustard?" She said, "Because ain't none in our house. Nobody in our house likes mustard." If they said something about, "Well, did Mama fix me a sandwich with mustard, with my mustard on it?" And if they said, "Yeah," she would know, they would know that person, exactly, that's a lie. Because ain't no mustard in her house, Yeah. So it's things like that you would think it's insignificant, but it would mean a lot to a child, because the child is going to get around to, if somebody says this, then, you gotta have them to be smart enough to make the person say the word or say something that's going to use that or reference that safe word. So, can I turn it back over to you, David? Okay.
Well, there are a couple of organizations here in Louisville that do a couple of things. One of them, they're going to let you know, because you'd be surprised, how easy it is for trafficking to take place in your neighborhood. Around the corner from me, on the cleanest block, was a sex trafficking house. And it wasn't until one of the ladies said, "Why you got different hair every day?" She was asking one of the girls. and the whole thing was she wasn't seeing well.
Yeah.
And she said something to her kids, and one of her kids said something to one of their friends as a detective, and so that's how that information got to the neighborhood, was that you'd really be surprised what is going on. Here in Louisville, there's an organization called free2hope.org. They provide information. They also provide assistance to some of the ladies and gentlemen, or young kids, because usually that's that other crazy thing. I think it was a couple of months ago, the 15-year-old that ran away from home. Park Hill, right, exactly. Here's that whole thing. Nobody was thinking anything the wiser other than this clown that lived there and this young girl. Nobody thought this is what's going on here. So it's little situations like that that you need to be aware of that can be going on right under your nose.
And baby, you know, the organization that we were feeding the people in Kent,
Yep.
a lot of the people that live in there
Right.
are ones who have broken away from that and they are in hiding.
Right.
That's the reason why they secret people like that. And a lot of times people don't, we have situations where people will join here and they don't want their picture taken.
Right.
Because they don't want people to know where they are. We have to be sensitive to that. So we just have to start with that. So they don't mind it being taken, they don't want to touch.
There are a lot of situations, like I said, that are occurring right under your nose and you don't know it. That's why it sort of behooves you, is not meddling, to get to know your folk, the folk in your neighborhood. And many of you have heard me comment on things that have gone on in my neighborhood, because my neighbor that lives across the street, she said, "You're going to be one of the ones that gets killed, because as soon as you hear gunshots, you don't just open up the door. You come all the way out on the porch and you looking up and down the street." Yeah. Well, the other night, I don't understand. This is the second time it's happened. One of those deep sleeps, because my windshield got shot out. And the policeman said, your neighborhood has the worst rate of people shooting because they never hit their target. So it's good in one sense and it's bad in another, because my neighbor's house, my mother's house, the car, the neighbor's house on the other side, all have been shot by people shooting at somebody. And once again, they just miss every time. So, with that in mind, there are a couple of things that I really would like for you to do. Is on your own, make sure that you look up some of the things to look for with trafficking that may be going on in your neighborhood. Not only sex trafficking, but drug trafficking as well. Because one of those other things is a constant movement of people that lets you know something's going on there. Okay? If the same folk are not staying there in the house for long, that's also letting you know something else is going on there. So those are things for you to be aware of, and not just kind of say, oh, I don't want to be bothered with that.
The King's Country. That's what that's
I can't think of the name of it right now, but yeah.
But it has something that you can.
Right. Okay. Here's the one takeaway that I want you to note, and this is for any and every one of us. It's not what name you were called, it's what you answer to. And knowing that God has given you a name, faithful, courageous, bold, helpful. These are the names that God has given each and every one of you. And living out that name makes all the difference in the world. I'm not that tall, but having been this height since the 3rd grade, there were some names I got called. Because my 3rd grade companions were not that tall. Charlotte's another one that's in that same group. They was a little bit taller than the average kids. Right. So there were names that we got called that were not particularly nice. But once again, it's all in what you answer to. I was not the most athletic. So there were things that people thought I should be able to do that I couldn't. Now, I could tell you what you need to do, which means that I was going to get some money from you doing whatever it is, but I wasn't the one to do it. That same issue exists today. I don't hear it too often anymore because the age of kids wearing glasses is now much younger than it used to be. To see a 3-year-old wearing glasses tore me up. But that was not something when we were coming up that was thought of, that this child might need glasses. Okay? And the one thing that I enjoyed was there was somebody teasing the 3-year-old, and she said, I can see better than you can. And even without, she said, I can see better than you can without my glasses. And the whole thing was, is one thing, this is where I'm going with all this. Many of you remember my god brother, Tony. Tony, yeah. What was he known for doing? And that's what many people call him, Tony the Drunk. But what I found was he was Tony the teacher, because he could teach a kid. I didn't have the patience to teach a 10-year-old how to tie up their shoes. And I watched him teach this 10-year-old how to tie his shoes. I really had an issue more so with this child being 10 years old and not being able to tie the shoe. But the whole thing was there was some slow development there because of some things that went on in the household. And Tony picking this up, 5 times. He said, "Come on, man, we're going to do this again." And I'm like, by the 3rd time, I'm like, "You ain't got it yet?" He was also Tony the cook. Many of us know that Negro could cook you under the table. So there were just certain things that people didn't know about Tony. And it usually, with most addicts, all it takes is something triggering that behavior that makes them want to act out. And here's that other thing that was just so bizarre. He knew this was a safe place. So he knew he could come here and people were going to love on him no matter what. There were many times he got accused of things that I often found amusing because Tony was also one of those, if he did something, he ain't coming back. But if he took something, you best believe, like I said, he wasn't coming back. So there were times that he was accused of taking purses, accused of taking TVs, accused, He at one time said, "I didn't take it. I know who did, and I can help you go find." Okay. I'm not going up there, because I ain't snitching on nobody, but So there are some names, like I said, that we have given to people. We have given to people that he was a good basketball player.
Upstairs, I was downstairs, and he was drunk. They see him upstairs, so when he came up, I found myself before we started Sunday school class. I don't have him singing, crying. We had a good time. We remember that. I remember he said, and he said, and I forgot what I said to him. And we don't know. I think he knew he was dead.
Well, he found out he had cancer because some inconsiderate person said, "Well, you ain't got a long live no way."
And he was talking out there, he was saying that he died.
And for a medical person to look up on your chart and dismiss you, of course, all that made him want to do was drink some more. Because when he asked me, what did the prostate do? And I told him, and he said, well, they said I got a tumor. No, I got cancer. And I said, of all the things that I thought would have took him out of here, it would have been cirrhosis. But it was not. It was prostate cancer. In any event, next week we are continuing in our series, but next week is also Palm Sunday. And so we're going to be looking at civil disobedience. And there are some women in the Bible that had to go about this. Okay, here's where she was being kind, because I was going to start this a little different way. When is it okay to lie?
If it say somebody, somebody was on.
So didn't Rahab lie?
Never.
Okay, you're saying it's never okay to lie, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but God blessed her even with her lies. So what is that saying?
I don't know who you're talking about, but anyway, I just think maybe
Rahab.
she had Rahab. Okay, Rahab. Well, let me think about this. Because she was a believer. I don't know, and she was doing his work.
She was a Canaanite.
She was a Canaanite. That believed in God.
Okay. So here's that whole thing. Regardless of what we label, sometimes I really believe it is every time there's been a lie told that was for protection. That because God's ways are not our ways.
Right.
His thoughts are not ours. There's that passage in Romans that says he can take whatever situation and make it for our good. Okay? Yeah. So even in the midst of our line, now there's one thing. If you saying you see somebody with a gun and they looking for Ann, and you tell them, no, I ain't seen Ann, and you just saw her. Or say, I haven't seen her yet. But it's something else to say that she's in the concourse. Here's that whole thing. Here's that whole thing. It is one thing to withhold the truth, which is also a lie, and it's something else to volunteer too much information or inaccurate information. I think I saw her going down the street. Right. They went out the. So here's my cautionary spin on that. You need to be careful and be prayerful as to how God wants you to respond in any and every situation. And here's why. We need to thank God for the wisdom He's provided in times of distress, indecisiveness, and especially when we've been hurt by others. Because hurt people, what do? Hurt people. So you also need to ask God to direct you to someone who needs you to show an act of kindness, because you might be the only Bible they will ever read. You never know. Share with others how faith in God made it easier to handle tough decisions in critical circumstances. There was a young lady who her mother was on life support. The whole family just tore up. Her mother had made her the deciding person because her mother did not want to, this to be her only means of living, was to be on a machine. And she said two things she knew. One, her mother knew God. The other thing was she did not want her mother to suffer. And so when the decision came, it got to be kind of rough for the rest of the family because, once again, some were believers, some were not. Some had mistreated, some had not. So there are times that we need to be prepared to give those tough answers, especially when tough decisions need to be made. We also need to note that giving is an outward expression of the inward blessings that God has bestowed upon you. Each and every one of us, lame, crippled, blind, deaf, dumb, crazy, have been blessed in some kind of way. And so we need to be prepared to share the blessing. And it's not easy to understand, but it is essential to trust God, especially when you can't feel His presence. Because there are times that you are asking God, are you there? And He's not only telling you, I'm here, He's telling you, go around the corner. But God, I don't feel you. Okay? So, we just need to be careful. We need to be mindful when God is on the move.
He's always on the move.
With this big little boy.
Oh, I'm ready to tell you, I still kick myself every time that I remember when my car got stolen and I kept hearing God say, just go home. Just go home. Go home. I'm down here trying to get sympathy. Oh, my car got stolen. And what did my manager of the apartment complex say? Your car's been here all morning. And they just left not too long ago. So, be attentive to what He would have you to do. Because, yes, ma'am.
You know, God is opposite. Yeah, but a lot of times when you hear voices and you talk about it, waiting on something, this is discerning to know God's voice among the other presence that will come to you.
Usually there's a peace that is present when God is in the works versus some of that other stuff that we hear. That is exactly what it is, chaos. And people mean well, but notice those two words, mean and well. Sometimes the well is not meant right. So, I pray something's been said that brought about some decisions. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Because it is part of that lineage. He came through David. David came through Joseph. Also coming through Mary. Right. She's from that tribe. Her folk are from that tribe. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
What is Jesse the root? They call him the root.
Mm-hmm.
In the Bible. What does that mean? Tell me what that means, please.
Okay. It's basically when a root is planted, it is giving something stability, right? Okay. Jesse is the father of who?
Jesse, the father of
David.
David.
David, that's right.
David,
And so that's where that root comes from. It is a part of Jesse's root that Jesus is coming through.
Oh, okay. The part of the lineage. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I got it.
Anybody else?
Why? The people in, what is it, that candidate,
Mm-hmm.
does it say why all these people were left?
That was just how things were assigned to them. It doesn't mean anything in particular.
Different people that I prayed.
Her husband's left hand.
If you marry,
Here's the whole thing. It takes usually that whole body, even those differences are usually what helps us to get things done. No, ma'am. Yes, and the reason I say, right. So, once again, I pray something's been said that brought about some changes. Hopefully you won't be so quick to call somebody a name, because poor Tamar caught the blues last week. And she was not worthy of being called anything other than Tamar. She was doing what she had to do. This week, Rahab. Every time her name is called, she's Rahab the
Prostitute.
All right. So, that's the whole Jericho. Here's that whole thing. We just need to be mindful when we go to calling folk names, because sometimes, especially when it comes to children, because sometimes those words stick. And that's not always a good thing to have happen. All righty?
Yes. Right.
So with that in mind, I love each and every one of you. And what are we praying about? Yes, ma'am.
And an old woman like me to understand. Really, you should do it all.
I'll make sure she does.
David,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Cheryl Belmont White. Can you
Yes,
pray
ma'am.
for Mr. David Robinson? His Bobby's husband
Okay.
was admitted in the hospital yesterday.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Most gracious and all-wise God, we come before you, Lord, once again just saying thank you. Lord, you're such an awesome God.
Thank you.
You're such a never-failing God. You're such a merciful God, and we can't make it without you. Many times, Lord, coming up, we were called some names that were not so pleasant. We were called some names that have stuck with us, that have been quite hurtful. But Lord, I'm asking that you remind us that we are your child, and that you've given each and every one of us a new name. And that new name is that name that's going to get us to the other side, Lord. It's that new name that we've been given in glory. And because of our faithfulness, because of our courageousness, because of our boldness, those are the names that you've assigned to each and every one of us, and those are the names that we need to note are important. Lord, I just can't thank you enough for all the many ways that you are keeping us in spite of ourselves, keeping us in spite of what all is going on around us. You're keeping us sane. You're keeping us stable. You're keeping us able. There are many times, Lord, that there are some things that we needed, and before we knew it, it was provided, and they came from nobody but you. And so once again, Lord, I'm just saying thank you. Lord, I thank you for the struggles that we have gone through, because each one of those struggles has brought about a lesson that we needed to learn so that we could grow stronger in you. And it is through growing stronger in you that we are able to help others. And that's what you called us to do. You called us to be your compassionate companion. And so, Lord, that's what we need to be about. Lord, now, as we depart from this place, asking that you continue to be with us. There were a lot of names that were called today, Lord, because of the situations that are going on with each and every one of them. Some of them need a healing. Some of them need that compassionate touch. Some of them need guidance. Some of them need direction. But one thing is for sure, we all need you. And because we all need you, I'm asking you to move as only you can in those situations that nothing was mentioned in particular. Because you know what's going on, Lord. And we know that human agency can only do so much, but then there's a time that you need to step in and show up and show out. And Lord, we're just calling on that right now. Lord, once again, there are many that are hurting. There are many that need direction. There are many that need healing. Asking you to move as only you can. And as we depart from this place, for those that are traveling, Lord, I ask for your traveling mercies that we may reach our final destination for the day without any hurt, harm, or danger being there. We be careful to praise your name forever. These things we ask in your mighty, majestic Son's name, amen.